Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Lisa Vester. I'm the Cybersecurity Product Manager for DMARC Cybersecurity. And joining me today is Kieran Frost, the Chief Operating Officer for Sendmarc, and Sam van der Westhuizen from DMARC Cybersecurity in Business Development. So the purpose for today's webinar is to talk about DMARC and talk about how we can help you make the internet a safer place, how we can protect your domain from domain impersonation, and how we can protect your supply chain from domain impersonation attacks and BEC type compromised attacks. And just a little bit about Sendmarc, we're quite proud to partner with Sendmarc. They're not only local as lekker and made in South Africa, but they very much are helping all of our customers in South Africa make the internet a safer place. And ultimately, that's why we are here, to help make your organization safer and protect you from cyber threats and educate you on the threat landscape. And Kieran's got some interesting stats to share with us today on the cybercrime that's happening right now here in SA, and essentially how Sendmarc can help you create another layer of security around your email to ensure that your domain is protected. So over to you, Kieran.
Thanks, Lisa. That's a great introduction. So as mentioned, I think a good place for us to start is really the problem that we solve at Sendmarc, and the problem that we're trying to tackle. As you mentioned, our mission is to make the internet a safer place. The problem that we're trying to tackle is this, the scourge known as impersonation. So, most people realize these days that it's really simple to send a mail that looks like it comes from somebody else. And the reason that you'll do that as an attacker is that you're abusing that trust relationship, right? So you're abusing the fact that people, know Lisa and want to work with her. You're abusing that relationship to get some nefarious means, get some sort of a nefarious outcome to conclusion. And I think the best way to illustrate this is by way of example. So I'm going to tell a little bit of a story here. And this story is about a company called FACC. They're an aerospace manufacturer. They produce parts for the likes of Airbus, Boeing, Bombardier, these brands that you would have recognized. A large organization, 3,500 employees, started and run by a man called Walter Stefan. So Walter Stefan, built this company from the ground up, and built it into quite an organization. In May of 2015, Walter is on holiday with his family, having a great time. Unbeknownst to him, he's being impersonated. So while this is going on, while he's on holiday, FACC is in the process of acquiring another organization, and attackers are sending mails that look like they're coming from Walter to his finance department, all to do with this acquisition. And they eventually convinced the finance department to make a deposit of 49.5 million euro into their bank account. Now Walter returns. It's a big drama. Obviously everyone's concerned about the money that's gone missing. They start trying to recover as much of it as they can, and they do recover some of it, but the financial outcomes or the financial backlash from this is significant. So, in the year that it happened, the earnings for FACC was around 20 million euro. The attack, was as I mentioned, 49.5 million euro lost. There was a small amount of recovery, but it turns that profitable year for FACC into a loss, right? They end up losing. Yeah, go Walter. His board actually happened to feel exactly the same, and in fact, if you Google him today, you get met with stories about how he's the first CEO who was fired off the back of these impersonation attempts. So repercussions not only for the company in terms of that financial loss, but for Walter himself. I mean, I certainly wouldn't want my name to show up with a Donald Trump "you're fired" meme. For that to be the first image associated with me. And that's really the kind of problem that we're trying to solve at Sendmarc. And you might be asking yourself, how does this actually happen? How is it so easy for people to send impersonated emails? And it's really the result of two broad trends that we've seen in the way in which organizations consume email. So more and more organizations are using software as a service applications to perform a variety of functions, right? You might use in your company, MailChimp to do email marketing, and let's say Office 365 to send out your everyday emails. Now, these platforms are globally distributed, right? That's one of the benefits of utilizing an Office 365 is that they've got infrastructure all over the world. So if, the worst were to occur, your mail can continue to run. The other kind of big feature of these platforms, so if global distribution is the first one, the second big feature, or I suppose, outcome of using these platforms is that they're actually using impersonation to do the job that we want them to. So if we want MailChimp to send out a mail shot or, a newsletter to all of our customers, they have to impersonate our domain in the technical sense in order to do so. Now, the fact of the matter is that attackers have that same profile. They're using the same techniques on a technical level to send out their impersonation attacks. They're also globally distributed. So often, when you talk about attacking behavior, people will mention Russia and China, but we've seen attacks coming out of the US, coming out of Europe, coming out of South Africa. And so it's very difficult for these guys in the middle here, our staff, our customers, anybody who interacts with our brand, to tell apart a legitimate sender of mail from, a MailChimp who's legitimately impersonating our domain from an attacker. Now, the natural thing that people do is say, I've already protected against this. I've invested in a security platform that's going to perform a job in terms of protecting my staff. I've put lots of money there. I've bought Mimecast or Symantec or advanced threat protection from Microsoft, or there's a laundry list of these kinds of providers. Obviously, the quality of the job that these platforms are going to do is going to vary from platform to platform and config to config, but they do perform some job in protecting our staff. I'm not here to say that they don't, or that Sendmarc is a replacement for those platforms. What they cannot protect against is an attack that's destined for our supplier or our customers or somebody else in the rest of the world. So our customer, might be paying what looks like an invoice that comes from us, but is, oh, by the way, the banking details have changed. That's often an attack that we see. Our suppliers might be fulfilling fraudulent orders. So just to make this very real for you, I was dealing with a chemicals manufacturer down in Durban. They've got upstream suppliers up in Poland. Their domain was impersonated, an order sent to this upstream supplier, and a container's worth of product shipped to Lagos. Now, there's obviously repercussions there for the supply chain. There's financial implications of that. It ruins the relationship between these two organizations. It's really important that we don't only think about protecting our staff, that we extend this net of protection to the entire world. We don't want anybody other than the platforms that we decide to be able to send mail from our organization, our domain.
And so essentially what you're saying is if you've got an advanced email protection tool, that's going to work on the inside, but essentially something like DMARC is going to protect you on the outside as well. So the two actually complement each other, and you need to have both in place in order to ensure your domain is protected.
Exactly. Another way that people have explained their understanding of it to me is that the advanced security platforms are protecting mail coming into your environment. DMARC and Sendmarc is really about making sure that anything that goes out into the rest of the world is coming from the right place. So it's this inbound, outbound concept. So let's talk a little bit about DMARC. You made mention of it there. What is it? What does it do for our customers? How does it extend this global net of protection? Well, DMARC is a global and open standard. Engineers from the companies that you see here, which are brands that we tend to recognize, they got together and they developed this standard. And fundamentally, what DMARC gives us is two broad things. It allows us to exercise control on mails that are sent from our domain. So it allows us to tell the internet at large, when you receive a mail from me, and if it comes from an illegitimate source, I want that mail to be rejected. So it's receivers around the world that are actually enforcing this protection. And because it's receivers, and not, our legitimate platforms, that means that if anybody is sending a mail that is, not one of our legitimate platforms, that mail is going to be rejected. So this first element is control. The second element is visibility. So every time anybody receives a mail from you, we get notified about it. We get told a mail has come from such and such an IP address, and this is how it performs against some technical standards. And using that data, we're able to paint a picture of how well or poorly our legitimate pieces of infrastructure are configured. Does the world essentially recognize them as legitimate? And whether or not there's any abuse happening on the domain, whether or not there's any attacks happening on the domain. So that visibility, very important when you think about what we're trying to do in the control space. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. Now, you might be saying, I'm sitting on the southern tip of Africa. This is some standard developed by the guys in the US. How does this impact me? Sure, Karen said some anecdote about some guys in Durban. That's one story, right? Well, it's important to understand that South Africa is in a very unique space in terms of cybersecurity. So, we have the third highest number of cybercrime victims in the world. That's obviously not by dollar value. That's raw number per capita. And the reason that this happens, I mean, when you think about it, is quite obvious. So South Africa is a relatively wealthy nation in comparison to many of the other developing countries in the rest of the world, but we have low levels of technical literacy. So it's very easy to trick South Africans into paying an invoice or fulfilling an order, simply because there's this low level of literacy, but we have access to cash, right? The reason or the effect of this is that your customers, your staff, your suppliers, they definitely have individuals, people, human beings that are sitting in their organizations that are soft targets when it comes to impersonation attempts. And the fact of the matter is that in South Africa there's a lot of work for us to do. So if we compare South Africa as a country, and the levels of protection we're seeing in terms of DMARC versus some of the the developed nations, we are laggards. So you can see just under half of the top 900 companies in the UK are protected against impersonation attacks using DMARC. That number is obviously significantly lower in terms of South Africa. There's lots of work for us to do, and it's important that we do this work given the fact that we're such a soft target, right? We need to make this, we need to make ourselves, a little bit easier, or a little bit more difficult to catch. So how do we actually get this right? How do we, fulfill this job of protecting our domains? How do we improve those stats that I mentioned, in the slide previous? And the way that we do this is actually quite simple. We follow these 6 broad steps that can further be broken down into 2 phases, right? So in the first phase, what we need to do is we need to get visibility. We need to understand how the rest of the world sees our domain. So we go and we publish a DMARC record. This record basically tells the internet at large, hey, we want to know how our domain is being utilized. We want to see, as I've said, how well or poorly our legitimate stuff is configured, whether or not there's any attacks. So we go and publish that DMARC record. It tells the internet at large to start sending us reports, and we can then analyze that data. And using that data, we can understand exactly what we need to do to mitigate those 2 things, right? If our legitimate senders aren't seen as legitimate by the rest of the world, well, we better make sure that work happens, because we don't want to switch on protection and break anything along the way. So we use that data to produce a project plan, and we can then go and do that work of certifying the legitimate senders before ultimately protecting the domain against impersonation. When you do that work, there's a couple of pillars of value that we unlock. The first thing is that we bolster the security of the domain at large. We do this in 2 ways. Firstly, we get to that end goal of protecting the domain against impersonation, but we also improve the way in which mail is sent from each of our platforms. This is all powered by that visibility that I mentioned. Our customers tend to see improvements in delivery. You might be asking, what do I mean by delivery? Sometimes legitimate mail ends up in a spam bucket. The work that we do, telling the world who the legitimate senders are, means that it's more likely that those legitimate mails end up in an inbox as opposed to spam buckets. becomes a very strong tool for you to utilize internally in terms of compliance. What do I mean by this? Well, because let's illustrate this by way of example. Let's say someone in marketing, you've decided as an organization that you're going to use MailChimp, to send out mails. As an organization, could be your newsletters, whatever it might be. Let's say someone in marketing decides that they don't like MailChimp, they prefer to use another email marketing platform. Let's just use Everlytic as the example. Well, they're not going to be successful in sending out those mails. Firstly, it's going to show up in the data, which means we have recourse. We know that someone internally is misusing or using a platform that we as a group have decided against. And secondly, they're not going to be successful because just like an attacker, those mails are going to be rejected. So, when you implement DMARC, you get a strong tool to utilize internally in terms of compliance to group policies. And really, the entire journey is about building and strengthening, your online identity.
So, and just on that note, I guess with South African organizations needing to be POPIA compliant, we've seen a lot of our customers getting third-party risk assessments. And one of the questions that has come up is, do you have DMARC? But another one of the questions that has come up is, how are you, protecting your users in terms of training your users? But how are you, they want to essentially know, as your supplier, how are you protecting us? What security measures have you got in place to actually protect us from being impersonated? So I guess when it comes to getting POPIA compliant, this is something that's going to help our customers and our friends really protect their supply chain from a domain.
Absolutely, right? Everything that we do is really about an assurance of trust, right? It's about making sure that people can trust email that's coming from your domain. And that's really important for your entire ecosystem, for your customers, for your suppliers. It also means, and I mean, I hate to belabor the point, but it also means that, you have assurance and trust in what platforms are being utilized by your organization. And so you get to control the way in which information leaves your domain, which is an important part of this the broader discussion around POPIA and privacy of information. There was another point that I wanted to make, but it's completely slipped my mind, so I'm gonna crack on here. So what we can do is we can see how vulnerable an organization is, and what we've set up here is essentially an impersonation demonstration. So if you're watching the webinar, you can whip out your phone, open up your QR code app. If you've got an iPhone, you can just use the camera, scan the QR code, or you can follow the link over here. It's going to take you to a page. I can see Lisa's just doing it now. It's going to take you to a page that looks a lot like this, and it's going to ask you for 2 different email addresses. The first one is going to be your corporate email address, and the second one is going to be what we're going to ask you to put in there is a personal email address, maybe your Gmail account. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to send you what effectively amounts to an impersonation, right? So we're going to send you a mail from yourself. And the reason that we ask for both your corporate and your personal email address is that we're going to send an email to both of those locations. Now, really important to understand here, right? If either of those mails deliver, there's a problem, and you are exposed. And the problem, if it delivers to your corporate email address, means that there's work to be done in your perimeter. Your staff are liable to fall into the same trap that happened to the finance department at FACC, right? Using your CEO could be impersonated, a mail sent to the staff. If the impersonation attempt delivers to your Gmail account, well, that means that the rest of the world is exposed to impersonations, right? Your suppliers, your customers, anybody in the rest of the world, they're vulnerable to these kinds of attacks. So if either of those attacks land, there's a problem. We're also going to expose to you what we call a domain safety score. And the domain safety score is really just a measure of how easy or difficult it is to impersonate your domain. If you score a 3 out of 5 or less, you are vulnerable, and there's work to be done. Now I'm just going to bring this up, one more time, just in case anybody missed it. Give you a second there to scan the QR code. We'll also make sure that that link is present in the text below the webinar, so you'll have access to it there. I just want to kind of leave the content on these best practices that extend beyond just DMARC. So how do we protect against impersonation? What are some common sense measures that we can implement in our organizations? The first is the implementation of DMARC. It is the only way to globally protect against impersonation. It's the only way that you can tell receivers to not accept mails that don't come from legitimate sources. Whether through Sendmarc or somebody else, it's important that you get DMARC right in your company. We'd obviously prefer it's with us. The second thing that we, and the third thing, kind of speak to the same philosophy around securing your environment. And that's the implementation of two-factor authentication into your email. The reason that that's important is that, there's been so many data breaches of large platforms of late. And when I say of late, I'm talking about the past 5-10 years. Just having a password is not strong enough a security measure anymore. It's really important for that reason that you have two-factor authentication, so that if your password does get leaked out for whatever reason, it's not your last line of defense. For that same reason, you don't really want to expose web access to your email environments unless absolutely necessary. So both of those are just common sense measures that we encourage our customers to go on over and above DMARC. So I want to pause there, and talk a little bit about, pause and see if there's any questions really from Sam, from Lisa, anything else I can square away there.
I think that's fantastic. I think you've given us a fantastic overview of DMARC. If our customers have any more questions, they are welcome to email us at hello@numartacyber.co. And I think, what we've highlighted here is that it's important to have not just inbound email advanced protection, but also outbound email advanced protection. Do give us a call if you have any other questions. And Sam, I think, is going to talk us through how we can also set up a domain analysis to check if your domain is safe over and above doing the BSC type impersonation. This is something that we can offer you. So Sam, over to you.
Thanks, Lisa. And thanks, Kieran, for that. So if in closing, we can run a free analysis report, and how we do that is we just change your DNS with one click, and we can run that analysis report, and we run it for 2 weeks, as mentioned through Kieran, and then we will present this report through to you. So please reach out to myself, and we can check your domains and make sure and see what domains are safe, and how your exposure report, what is presented in your exposure report.
Great, thank you. Just in closing, and just to speak to this idea of the exposure reports, and maybe allay some concerns that customers might have. When you do that DNS update, it's not going to have any impact on your current mail flow. It's effectively in a reporting mode, so we're not going to break anything by doing it. And something else that I think is really important, especially given the recent enactment of POP here, we don't collect any personal information. You'll see here, we'll just know that a mail was sent from Click Dimensions, as an example over here, not from or to a particular person. And that's obviously really important in terms of private data. So it's a safe move for you to make, and one that we would really encourage you to go on. So I just want to thank both Lisa and Sam for having me on the call today, and just to reiterate that email address. If you do have any questions, it's hello@numartacyber.co. So from Sendmarc, I'd just like to extend my thanks to everyone that's watching, and to both Lisa and Sam.
Thank you, Kieran. And from Numata IT and Cybersecurity, once again, ladies and gentlemen, we are here to keep you safe. We're here to help you create a cybersecurity posture within the organization. If you need help with the risk analysis or need help with just looking to see what you currently have in place, please feel free to reach out to us. We've got cybersecurity awareness training together with advanced email threat protection, together with obviously the likes of Sendmarc in our product stack, and we're happy to help you and advise you. Our advice is free, and we're here to help you along the way to prevent a cyber breach from happening within your organization. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you, Kieran. Thank you, Lisa.
Thanks.